hopefully you guys can be able to tell right away that yes, hopefully this works, and the webcam has been upgraded. As I had said, when I first became a partner, one of the first things I would do once the money came in would be upgrade the webcam. I have done that. I have also upgraded the memory in the computer too, so hopefully that will help somewhat as well. But we'll see how all this goes. This being the first video, and what this video will be about is about a few different things. Basically, I got about 10 emails, and that's a lot for usually me on a subject. Usually I only get maybe 2 or 3, and I usually know I need to talk about something, but this I got a bunch on. About 10 different ones talking about this. Apparently, and I hate to bring this up again, but as the title said, ECW killed wrestling, and then I guess YouTube shooters, even though I hate that term, killed it even more. So what does that mean? Well, if I'm going to include the link to the PWR. Yes, I'm going to talk about PWR again. I've talked about them so much it's almost nauseating to me, but I'm going to talk about them again because somebody noticed that on their latest video, first of all, Frank on the show went on a little tirade talking about how he felt ECW killed pro wrestling, and a lot of people wanted me to kind of defend that because they didn't think that that was correct. I agree. I wouldn't say ECW killed wrestling as much as, you know, the WWE be going national killed wrestling, because, you know, the WWE wasn't the first one, was the first one to do it, was the first one to kind of go into other people's territories, but they weren't the first ones who were capable of doing it. World Class was able to do it. There was a few other promotions that back in the time they would have been able to do it as well. It was something that eventually was going to happen because of the way TV was changing, and the fact that with cable television and all of that, that TV was changing, and so wrestling was going to have to change too. When you got to when ECW first really got big, it's one of the things that happened was that wrestling sucked at the time. I'm just going to put it like that. You're talking about both WCW at the time and WWF at the time were not very good. And WWF, you had a lot of them trying to harken back and try to rekindle a lot of the, you know, the 80s, using a lot of the kind of kiddie gimmicks. I mean, people talk about kiddie gimmicks now. You need to go back and watch 93. That was kiddie gimmicks. That was over-gimmicking guys. Doing a lot of things that just didn't work. And a lot of, you know, there was a lot, because of all of the fans that Hulk Hogan and Vince McMahon had made in the 80s, you now had all these older fans that still wanted to watch pro wrestling, and because of that, they were older, and so it wasn't quite catching on. You also just, as time went on, you know, fans just got, you know, smarter to the business as well. They kind of understood, even though the internet hadn't really popped up yet to a large degree, the fans had just instinctively had become smarter about the business. In WCW, you had a lot of the same thing. You had Hogan coming in. You had, which, you know, was supposed to help, really didn't help because of some of the booking decisions. You also had just, you know, redoing a lot of the same gimmicks that we saw from the 80s again. It just didn't work, and neither product was really just, wow, this is not good. Then you had ECW, and ECW was different. ECW was hardcore for the reason that it was different, not to simply be hardcore. Now, if you want to argue that hardcore wrestling has ruined wrestling in this extent that fans demand more of wrestlers, that's a different subject to me. Because if you truly followed ECW from start to finish, you saw that as soon as WCW and WWE at the time, I believe it turned into E, well, it may have still been F, had started to kind of copy the ECW style, ECW went, you could tell, was trying to, if you just look at the guys they were bringing in, the newer guys they were bringing in, they were going to more of a, you know, pure wrestling, almost what ROH became. ROH basically became what ECW, in my opinion, would have became. I don't know that for a fact. I've never heard anyone say that for a fact, but just from watching how ECW was developing at the time, and then looking at, you know, Rob Feinstein and Gabe didn't just say, we're going to do something completely and thoroughly different from what, you know, Paul Heyman had planned. Paul Heyman undoubtedly, in my opinion, had this planned. He had planned going to more of a pure wrestling product. Rob Feinstein and Gabe just decided just to go with it, and that's why it was successful. So I would say that ECW did not kill pro wrestling, it just changed pro wrestling. It made it more apparent that wrestling needed to change. It had gotten stale, it had gotten old, and like every product, like everything, wrestling needs to change at times. Now, if you want to say that, to change something you have to kill it, then I would go along with that. But I definitely wouldn't say that ECW killed pro wrestling. Damien had said that he felt along the same lines that the internet killed pro wrestling. I would say the exact same thing. I think the internet just changed pro wrestling. It made it where the fans were smarter, and because the fans were smarter, the bookers had to do things different. Yet, if you go back again and you look at ECW, you look at every guy, you look at Paul Heyman, you look at every guy that pretty much talks about ECW, they always say that the ECW fans were the easiest ones to con, and because they thought they knew everything, and because of that, they were able to do a lot of things that you wouldn't normally be able to do because they thought they knew everything. So it was actually easier to con them in some instances. So, I've never bought really into that the internet killed pro wrestling because it made the fans more aware of what went on, and everything went on. I think it just made it where you had to change the product a bit and make the product maybe a little bit more intelligent and just change it up a little bit to where it worked a little bit better. Now, to the other reason why I'm making this vid, and that's because after Frank did this, they went directly to a caller, and a caller basically said, he agreed with Frank, and then for some weird reason he said that YouTube shooters, which I guess I would be included on, even though I hate calling myself that, are what's killing pro wrestling, and he went on this big, long tirade that was basically the same tirade anyone would make about, the internet wrestling community as a whole. So I'm not sure exactly where that came from. This guy definitely watches, I would say, my vids from things that he said in the video, and so, if he did, hey, comment or something. But I would totally disagree with that for the exact same reason that I don't think we do. People have often said that we're overcritical. I don't think it's asking to be overcritical. I purposely do not review every TV show. I've reviewed the live impacts because they were live impacts and they were special impacts, and I would probably review some, WWE stuff if I didn't usually work on Mondays and other things like that. But I don't agree with necessarily reviewing TV shows, for example, mainly because I don't see any purpose in it. Why would you review a TV show if you're not really, or if the payoff of the TV show is the pay-per-view? That's the way it should be. Now, if that's the way it is, then the pay-per-view ultimately is the grade on the TV show. Because if the TV show did its job, then it made you interested in the pay-per-view, and if the pay-per-view does its job, it gives you the payoff for everything you saw on the TV show, and they should work together. So that's why I don't do that. But I don't think fans are being overly critical if they criticize something that they don't like, something that definitely, in their opinion, needs to be changed. I mean, you got fans out there that still scream about John Cena, even though you can look at the numbers, you look at everything, and that's not true. But then you have other people that bring up, valid points on every company, and I don't think there's any problems with that because it allows the fans to be a little bit more vocal. Maybe that's a good thing, maybe it's a bad thing. But I definitely think that if it's evident that, because of the internet, it's not just wrestling that has changed because fans are more vocal, but there's lots and lots and lots of forms of entertainment that are the same way. The movie industry goes through the exact same problem, where if a movie gets bad buzz on the internet before it comes out, often it dies at the box office. And the same thing about buzz on the internet. If it gets good buzz on the internet, sometimes that helps it greatly and to a huge extent. Blair Witch Project was the first movie to really capture, I think, that was the fact that it had all this internet buzz, and it's because of that it became this big, huge monstrosity of a movie. But I don't think you can just point to YouTube shooters and say that they are the problem and they are what's killing wrestling. You know, he brought up, this guy brought up the fact that, you know, we often go after Triple H, which I think I'm the only one that really goes after Triple H, but I'm sure I'm not the only one, but I'm one of the main ones that really goes after Triple H. And then, you know, the PWR guys talk about, you know, the fact that they don't like going into, you know, the backstage politics, this, that, and the other. Here's the thing. Backstage politics matter, and, you know, I don't talk about everything that happens backstage that I always hear. I don't care about who's sleeping with who. I don't care about who's doing what. You've never heard me complain that, you know, Triple H should not have his job because of who he's married to. I've never said that. I've said that, you know, the way that he is used and the way that he, you know, he has a lot of power in that company because he's who he's married to and because of who he is, of just who he is. Which means to me, when he gives this BS line, which to me it is I'm just doing what I'm told when I go out there and I bury guys. He has enough power to say, you know what, that's not a good idea. Let me go out there and let this guy look good. You know, it always amazes me. Triple H thinks the world of Ric Flair. Ric Flair isn't seen as the greatest because because all the world titles that he held. It has nothing to do with that. It has to do with all the great matches he was in. And part of the reason why of all those great matches he was in was because he made guys look good who were not maybe on his level. He made people want to care about the matches that he was in. And Triple H does not do a good enough job of that, in my opinion. That's my big gripe with Triple H. It has nothing to do with who he's married to. It has nothing to do with the family he married into. It has nothing to do with that. It has more to do with the fact of his power in the company, which he would have even if he wasn't married to who he was married to, because he had a lot of that power before he was married to who he's married to. So to me, that is not a big deal. My problem is when backstage politics circumvent and start punishing, or shouldn't say punishing, but start making the product not as good as it should be. Which, hey, we saw that with WCW. We saw the backstage politics basically be a cancer that destroyed WCW. We've seen that in WWE as well, in which backstage politics just... When backstage politics become a huge problem, you can just tell, because guys aren't happy, guys go out there, and when guys aren't happy doing what they're doing, you can tell when you're watching it. And so I don't see any problem talking about that. Now, if you're going to start talking about who's sleeping with who, and, you know, this guy did this, you know, I didn't come on here and talk about, you know, Joey Styles punching out JBL. I didn't talk about that at all. I could have, but I didn't, because I didn't, it's a good story, but I didn't think it was a relevant story, in my opinion, to what I like to talk about. So there is that, and I think that, you know, the PWR guys basically said they don't like talking about internet rumors because that's exactly who they are, even though then they turned around and said that even though, you know, the news that they deliver come from certain sites. To me, there's two sites you get your news from. You get them from Pro Wrestling Insider, and you get them from, you know, Dave Meltzer and Brian Alvarez. That's it. You get them from those three guys. If it doesn't come from those three guys, then it's probably not good news. I don't report news. I don't report things that, to me, don't come from there. So there is that. Or that I have believed have come from there. You know, those are the things that I talk about, because those are the people I think you trust. So there is that too. But I just wanted to come on here and talk about that because I got, as I said, I got about 10 emails about that. And to me, that, for me, with all the other emails I got, that's usually a lot within a couple of days of people wanting me to talk about the same thing over and over and over and over. And it was the exact same thing. They all said, you know, talk about this and talk about this. Talk about this and talk about this.